I've learned many, many lessons in my life, living 5 decades on this planet, you learn a lot of things. So I think one of the more important lessons that I've learned is to go with your gut instinct. Um, a lot of times I have gone against my gut instinct, overthought something, and just, lived to regret it in a lot of cases. So I've learned, you know what, just go with that still small voice, go with that gut instinct and trust it and trust, what you know to be, true.
Patience has been like a big thing for me personally. And I learned that from my mom. My mom is a very patient person, but I'm impatient in a sense where I want things to hurry up and happen now. Like, I want this right now.
Patience impacts every aspect of my life. Things that I want now don't always happen now. So I've learned to be patient. I've learned to always trust in God to make things happen the way that they should happen because I think I know what's best for me.
I had to learn to be patient because I had a lot to learn in order to, grow and progress and, just evolve overall in my career. To grow as a person, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I had to be patient.
Lean on God and make sure that I keep the faith, make sure that I wait for things to happen, not be anxious about it not happening when I think it should happen.
And I've learned that life is not always fair. When my children were young in school, they had they had done their very best on whatever the situation was. They would come to me, Mama, that wasn't fair. So I would always say, life is not always fair. Do what you know is the right thing and the good thing to do. And, it's just part of life. Life is not always fair. And whenever I encounter anyone now that says, life is not always fair, I give them the same response. Life is not always fair. It's never going to be fair, but don't let that stop you from doing what you know is good and right to do.
I would say be slow to speak and swift to hear. Case in point, when I got out of college, and of course, I got the job working with the state, I was a probation parole officer, and we had to go to Salemburg, North Carolina for training. It was like a 6 week training. We had to shoot the gun and do quite a few things. And by us being what we called in those days Bishop Johnsons, I always kind of felt that we were older or looked older than we really were. So I'm already set up thinking that people are thinking of things about me that probably weren't true. But after our first meeting in class, this gentleman came up to me, rather nice gentleman, and he said, introduced himself, and I introduced myself. He said, I looked at you in class and I was watching you. He said, you really remind me so much of my mother. And the first thing I thought was, I look old enough to be your mama. And he was probably older than I. And so the first thing I did was made this probably terrible, ugly face. And I said, oh no. And he looked so, bewildered. And he said, my God, I'm so sorry. He said, if you knew my mother, you wouldn't have said that. And my mother always told me and told her children, be slow to speak, swift to hear, always count to 10 before you speak or give an answer. You have plenty of time to say it. And if you say it out of turn, it can be so ugly, you can never take it back. So I would love to say, be swift to hear and be slow to speak and swift to hear. And if you don't say something when you feel like you just got to say it, just don't. You can always say it later. But if you say it out of term, it can be so devastating to the other person and even to you. So there, be slow to speak, swift to hear. I'll pass that on to everybody.
And my response is be good and be kind. And I take this from one of my favorite quotes, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it reads, I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again.
It's okay to not have all the answers all the time. It's okay to fail at things, because it's in that failure that you learn, a better way or a different way to do something. It helps you grow. And I think that so much of my life, I've always felt like I had to have all the answers. I had to be that go-to person that always knew the right direction to go in. And it's a lot of stress and pressure that you put on yourself unnecessarily. So I'd have to say, it's just okay. Be okay with saying no and not having all of the answers all the time.
People want you to be silent and just listen. And that's not me. I'm always going to speak my mind. I'm going to say what I need to say. And I'm never going to shrink to fit into any box or what people think I should be. So, not being afraid to use your voice is very important. And don't let anyone take that away from you.
I would say never stop learning. You're never too old to learn, and you are never too young to teach. Many times we think we know it all, but we can learn things from babies. We can learn from old people. We can learn from young people. We can even learn from animals, and we can learn from nature. And I have a little spiel here I just want to share. I'm not exactly sure who told me this, but they said that these guys were driving and it was raining and the car got stuck in the mud. They tried to back it out or drive it out, and the more they drove, the tires just spin. And so they just couldn't get it out. And they looked and get out and look around, and they pushed. Other guys stopped and helped. They were going to pick up the car in the back. And when the driver would put his foot on the gas, they were going to try and push it. And so nothing worked. And finally, this old drunk, every neighborhood has a drunk usually. And this old drunk was standing over there puffing on a cigarette across the street at the service station. So he found the old board and he stepped out and walked over and said, guys, young boys, let me tell you something. He said, if you take this board and put it up under the tire, and then y'all get behind and push and lift up on it, when you put on the gas, instead of it spinning in the mud, it will catch on the board and you'll be able to pull the car out. Their mouths fell open, but it worked. So who would ever think that old drunk could teach some young boys how to get the car from being stuck in the mud?
Always know your worth. Always. Always acknowledge your vulnerabilities. You have to know your weaknesses. But always seek your strength. Always know your strongest points. Always know where you can prevail. And if you fail, that's a life lesson.
I've been really blessed, even through my struggles and ups and downs. A lot of days, many days, God has given me the best day of my life. Outside of course, having my beautiful daughter, Brianna, that was, of course, one of the top days of my life. But I think really, if I had to put them in order, the best day was finally realizing who Christ was in my life and who I was in Christ. Um, you know, and that's just not, just something I'm saying for the sake of saying it, but really coming to realize how blessed I am, and the fact that God chose me to be with him for eternity was truly like just that life altering moment that you hear about, it really did propel me to a different mindset, a different like level in how I chose to live my life and interact and, and trust in God and just absorb the messages that are being preached and the words, in the scriptures that I read. It hits differently now that I know, the true meaning of being a Christian. So that had to be like that turning point, the pinnacle day that I would hold above most others.
The day that I learned that I would not go to hell if I had a relationship with my mother, my father, and my family. Back in the day, all that were without were dogs. If they fought against the church, we couldn't look at them, we couldn't talk to them, we couldn't have anything to do with them. And the day that I loved my family. I loved my parents. We were a very, very close knit family, and I just loved them. And when I found out that I could not have anything to do with them, it hurt me so badly. Uh, early on, I would sneak around and go see them, go see my mom, and my dad was sick at one time. He was in New York and he was sick, and Dad passed. Mother came back home to live in the house, and we still couldn't have anything to do with him. I didn't even go to his funeral. My sisters begged me to please come, please come. I would not go because I was afraid I would go to hell if I did that. But when I learned that I would not go to hell for loving my family and being able to have relationship with them, that was one of the best days of my life. And I'll say this and then I'll put a cap on that. After my mom came back home from New York, was in the family home, she had a birthday, and I took her out to breakfast that morning, and she enjoyed it so much. She said, Vaughn, I just enjoyed this so much. I hope we can do this again. I made my mother so happy. Just taking her out to breakfast, and I went to a restaurant to make sure that none of the saints saw me because I didn't want it to get back to the church that I was having anything to do with my family. So that really, really made me very happy. That was one of the happiest days of my life. I've had lots of good days, but this is one of the happiest days.
It was the day that I graduated from East Carolina University, Greenville, North Carolina. My educational journey spanned 30 years, continuously part-time. I worked full-time. I was a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. And the day that I graduated, I was 59 years old. I had my 5 children were there. I had 4 grandchildren there. And that was one of the greatest moments of my life because number one, I was finished with that part of my education, and it was a struggle. I intend to see it to the end, and that was one of the best days of my life.
I was probably about 13. I was in middle school. So my granddad, Big John, he had this pickup truck that was really, really loud. You can hear this pickup truck like miles away. So I'm getting out of school. I'm like walking with my little friends, and I hear this truck. I'm like, that's my granddad truck. Like nobody else has this truck. You can hear it before you see it. Like I know that's my granddad truck. And it was my granddad. He got off work early this day and decided to pick me up from school. And he was waving out the window like, neek, neek, like waving me over to get in the truck. And my friend's looking like, who is that? So I just go and jump in the truck because at that point it's like, why you pick me up in this loud truck? But it turned out to just be the best day because he had a bunch of errands to run. He had so much stuff to do, but I was just with my granddad like all day. He told the funniest but corniest jokes. He always had stories to tell, and it was just the two of us together. And with him passing like shortly after that, that really stood out to me. Like he thought about me of all people this day to pick up and just, roll with him for the day. So that was really like the best day for me. And I remember that very clearly in my mind. So, yeah.
I was blessed with the knowledge that I couldn't earn my way into heaven. Okay. I'm so serious about that because I've always worried about how I dressed, what colors I wore, my hair, what words I used. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry for using that word. Am I going to go to hell for using that word, or wearing that outfit, or looking at that guy? The moment I was blessed with the realization that it was all about God's grace, that was the best moment of my life. And it was like I lost 50 pounds. I carried that with me all my life, worrying about not being saved because I wasn't doing the right things. I wasn't saying the right things, was acting the right way. It was such an eye-opening, best day, best moment of my life. As simple as that.
When I retired after 26 years of service, for the first 6 months, I planned to just relax on the sofa with the remote in my hand and just surf TV all day long. After 6 months, I planned to get up and go to Walmart and become a greeter, but that did not happen. And I grew up in Washington County, Tier 1 county, if you know what that is about. And we would have these family conversations on the porch about what we would like to see in our community, what was not there for our young people, the jobs that were not there for good jobs for the citizens of the county. So we decided that we were going to start a nonprofit. And I have learned that many small communities had rebuilt their economic system, their economic development through the performing arts, through cultural arts. So, we took that avenue because there were no cultural arts opportunities in that area. So that's what we decided to do. We wanted to replicate this facility. We went to visit that facility, but just the feasibility study was $157,000 just for them to do the feasibility study. So when I learned that, I kind of went into remission. I said, how are we going to get this money? This is a poor county. But, I pulled myself together and we said, we'll just start with what we have. So we started a nonprofit. It's the Alliance for Greater Eastern North Carolina. And we've had several jazz concerts just to bring the performing arts and the cultural arts to our county. Because, some of our citizens, some of our young people, they've never seen a live band performance. So that's the major avenue that we have taken for our nonprofit. But there are other things that we veer off in the community do also.
The goals that I had when I was younger, of course, had changed as I experienced life. Was influenced by other, outside factors and things like that. My goals initially may have been, just graduate from high school. And then it became, what? Let's go to college and graduate from college. Let's be a good mother. My goal was always to just be better than I was the day before. It's ever changing because, life is always changing. But I think one of the main goals that I had was after I had my daughter, of course, my goals changed. But my goal was whenever I leave this world, I wanted her to know that I gave her all the tools, all of the opportunities to be the best absolute person that she could be. And that meant introducing her to Christ and absorbing her, putting her in that environment so that when I was gone, I knew that she would be okay. I knew that she would follow, the path that God had laid out for her. So that was like my ultimate goal, but, spiritually, but of course, and being saved myself, got to save me first. But my goal, like naturally, is to kind of grow in my career. I went back to school as an adult, and I worked really hard. Raising a child as a single parent, I worked very hard to get my earn my bachelor's degree. And with her encouragement and the encouragement of my family, I continued on until I achieved my master's degree. And it was that was a goal that I had set, and thank God I was able to achieve that goal. And now it is take what I know and just grow it and be better and be bigger. So that is still my goal. And until I, leave this world, I will always be reaching for the next level?
I'm very self-motivated, so I was really just trying to plan out the whole trajectory of my career, like what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna get there, and it's like, mm-mm, it don't work like that, you know. So it goes back to being patient. It goes back to being prayerful, asking God and trusting and believing that He's gonna make it happen, but it's on His time. But of course, me not being patient, I wanted it to happen on my time. So my dreams and goals of being where I am now have never changed. I just needed to wait. I needed to be quiet. I needed to just pray and believe. I needed to let God do the work. I'm doing the work, but I needed to let God do the work to get me to where I wanted to be.
It's really changed and it's really been modified. Early on, as a young woman, a young mother, well, I'll start off saying I have always been somebody's something. I was my mother and daddy's daughter. I was my sibling's sister. I was my husband's wife, and I was my children's mother. And all that happened from the time that I was born until the day that I was no longer with my husband. So that will come later. But I always had the dreams and the goals. I thought to be the best mother, to have the big, nice home, to have the best kids, everybody in college, out of college, everything, the perfect, beautiful white home with the picket fence, the good jobs, and everybody going to church, everybody doing just the right thing, nothing going wrong. That was what I had in mind. And I realized later on that, you know, I even had a blueprint printed out of the house that I wanted. And my goals were so big, it was the place where my house would be was called Vaughn's Estate. My name is Yvonne, so I was going to name it Vaughn's Estate. And then I was going to have Laura's Lane, which is my daughter, Stephanie's Circle, Williams Court. I was going to name all the streets in there after my family. But of course, that didn't happen. And I was going to have my wing of the house, and I was going to be on the west wing. And I was going to have the perfect his and hers, vanity, just everything, just perfect. And those things didn't happen. So I realized that all the big dreams and goals that you have just might not come true. I have relegated myself to the fact that what has happened, where we are at this point, I'm satisfied. I wished it could have been better, but I am content with where I am and where we are. And I am more concerned now about my soul and the soul of my family, my children, my grandchildren, and my great grands, because I realize that our soul has to spend eternity somewhere. And I want them to be more aware of where their soul will spend eternity rather than all been out of shape over what they have and don't have, because there are many mansions in my father's house, so it awaits us.
I started out early on wanting to be an educator. And I tried it on for a while. I tried it for about 7 years. And one day, this little kid walked in my classroom, kindergarten classroom, and beautiful little child. Each day during kindergarten classes, we have the students to take what's called a nap time. It's called nap time. So this little kid was supposed to have been taking a nap. And instead of taking a nap, she was racing one of the toys across the floor to another child. And it was a wooden truck, one of this, about that size, about a foot long. And it had corners to it. And back then we weren't so careful about toys being dangerous. They were just toys. And this little boy raced the truck back across the room to her before she was ready to catch it, and it hit her in the forehead, and it broke the skin. And I went over and tried to console her, and she looked up at me, and she told me she was going to sue me. This is a kindergarten child. And then the next words that came out of her mouth were racially motivated. And I said, gotta go, gotta change this career, because I'm not allowed to touch this child. So I need to go. So I says, and her name is Kimberly, and I said, sweetheart, let's go to the principal's office. And she says, I said, my mother said, can't touch me. And I says, okay, I won't touch you, but let's go to the principal's office. So we walked to the principal's office together, and I asked the principal to call her parent, and he wanted to know the circumstance. And I told him, he says, oh, right away, I'm calling. Right then and there, I said, you can't discipline someone else's child, so let's change careers. So I left the education department and I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles. And within the Department of Motor Vehicles, I started out as a driver license examiner, which I was like thrilled about becoming a driver license examiner. And I was responsible for taking clients on a road test to, get the driver license. And I had an accident one day that basically crushed my knees into a dashboard. And the little kid looked at me and says, do I get my driver license? And I said, sweetheart, we just ran into a wall. She said, that was all I did wrong? I said, we just ran into a wall. So I said, well, Barb, I think you need to change careers again. So I went from being a driver license examiner, which I loved dearly, to being an administrator. I was a director at the Division of Motor Vehicles. And while I was a director at the Division of Motor Vehicles, I had 1,600 employees. I had 125 offices, and quite a few adults working beneath me that wanted promotions but never earned promotions, wanted a paycheck but never earned a paycheck, putting it simply. And there was politics left and right. So I said, well, let's study IT. Let's get into the tech support world. So while I was director, I watched my tech support. I took classes for tech support, and that became boring. So long story short, I went from an educator to an administrator to tech support, all within 35.7 years. And now that I'm retired, I'm interested in blue collar work. Go figure. So my goals have changed, and I've learned from every single aspect of my, career changes, and I wouldn't change anything in the world for what I've gone through, because I think everything happens in a person's life for a reason, and I am here because of where I've been and all through God's grace.
With life, you're going to experience devastating situations, and everything seems devastating in the moment. And then you look back on it with a different eye and you go, well, maybe it wasn't that bad, or, God got me through this. So I'm good. Of course, but the death of my father was devastating. Even though I was 7 years old at the time, I still vividly remember when he passed away. I was a daddy's girl, so I was close to my father, even though my parents had divorced by the time, he had passed away. I still was in his life. And it was very, very devastating for me as a child. I don't think I understood the gravity of not having him around, for the rest of my life, that he wouldn't be there. But it definitely impacted my life, and changed some direction that I would have, influence that I would have. Not having a father around for that sense of protection or that sense of guidance. And but yeah, I vividly remember being in the church and seeing him laying, there in his casket. And I just stared at him because I needed to take it all in. and make it real for me, and I don't know, it was definitely a time in my life that I'll never forget. It's sad now that I am, it's been quite a while since he's passed on, that I don't remember everything about him anymore, but I just remember his smell and his touch. I don't remember his voice like I used to. I don't quite see his face now. It's very foggy for me when I, try to think about him. But I remember now that when he would hug me, it would be that scratchy, that scratchy beard that he always had, because it was never quite grown in. And I remember that he always smelled like Old Spice, like that smell that men wore back in the day. I vividly remember those two senses. So I just thank God that even though that was a devastating loss, he put many male figures in my life to help fill in the gap, and stand in his absence when I needed a father figure there. So it was devastating at the moment, but now I just thank God for, his will and how he did help me through those times when I really did miss having my daddy around.
I have. I have. It was the death of my son-in-law, and the way he died was gun violence. And to me, it was so avoidable. It was so unnecessary. And what really got me was knowing that my two granddaughters, 4 and probably 1.5 or maybe 2, would have to grow up without their father. And my oldest daughter was just a daddy's girl. She loved her dad to no end. And she really, I could just see her having issues. And to this day, she does have issues. And I think a lot of that stems to the fact that she grew up without a natural father. I loved my son-in-law. He was a good man, and he was a good man to my daughter. But things happened, and he lost his life, and to gun violence because of the love that he had for her and for the children. It was not easy. I get emotional sometimes when I talk about it now, but I have moved on. I've prayed. I've asked the Lord to help us and to guide us and to lead us in the right way. So I have moved on. I had to deal with it, and I basically dealt with it on my own. There have been a lot of hard feelings. The family had to heal everything. So we have come together, and I think we'll put that behind us. But there are scars that I think we will carry to our graves from that. But we have moved on.
The loss of my mother at the tender age of 13. I don't even know how I survived that tragic event. There were 4 boys and 4 girls in my family. My baby sister was always daddy's girl. My twin brothers were out doing their thing, and my 2 older brothers, one was a trucker and one was in the military. And then my 2 older sisters was out doing their things. So it left my baby sister and myself and my twin brothers at home. And when I think back about how sad my dad was when my mom died, and he just withdrew and became sort of a recluse. Nothing existed except for his pain. His children didn't exist. Nothing around him existed. It was just his pain and sorrow that he was dealing with. So that left us kids alone. How we got through that, I can only say by the grace of God, because we had to practically fend for ourselves, practically raise ourselves, because he was in such condition that we couldn't turn to him for anything. So being at the age of 13, and my twin brothers were 14, my baby sister was 10 or 11, we just had each other, and God just brought us through that tragic period. That was the most tragic thing that has ever happened to me. When my mom passed, right before she passed in August, and I turned 13 in June. And my mom and I were just becoming close friends. And she was, bringing me into the kitchen, bless her heart, trying to show me how to cook, and I don't think it ever worked. But she just wanted me to be there with her and to show me how she prepared for Dad and how she prepared, for us. And, she let me roll the dough for the chicken stew or chicken pastries. And I was just proud to be there with her because I had her all to myself. And my baby sister was outside underneath the car with my dad. But I had my mom all to myself. And to lose her at such a tender age was just, it was tragic, but by God's grace, I'm here today and I survived.
The earliest like devastating situation I can remember is my granddad passing away. It, when things it happened suddenly, like he wasn't sick, he wasn't ill, he was, like this big strong man. He worked hard, he took care of his family, he provided. So to lose him at the time that we did, it was hard. It was rough. I was young. Um, and sometimes you don't fully understand like the why or the concept of death or why this particular person had to go. But my family stuck together, which was very important, and that's what really helped to get us through. Um, I still remember him, his laugh, his cologne. He was like, he had like every Dickie suit in every single color. Um, I just remember everything about my granddad, and I just think about where I was when he passed, and then how much I've accomplished over the years of my life, and I just know that he would be proud. It's been challenging over the years to see my parents sick, especially being away from home, not always having the time to, pull away from work to be there, physically in person. Um, and then it's your parents. It's like, what can I do to fix this? But I know it's nothing I can physically do to fix it, but just, being there, talking, just trying to keep them in good spirits, keeping them laughing for the most part. Um, but my siblings and I, we we stick together as a unit, so that helps to push all of us through. Someone may be struggling a little bit more, to deal with it than the other, but it's just having that support overall to fall back on that definitely helps, and just gets you through it from day to day.
When I was in my last semester in college, it was January, it was winter time, and looking over my requirements for graduation, I learned that I had to pass a swimming test or learn to swim. And, with all the other things I had to do, I attempted to learn to swim. All these young students came in and they just took right over, and they just caught on to it. But being a senior citizen, not quite a senior citizen at that time, I struggled. In a 4-foot pool, I could not swim. I could not, I just couldn't do it. I could go underwater, I could hold my head, I could blow bubbles, but I could not get on my back and float because like the whole pool was just gonna come crashing in on me. But I had a very understanding professor. So you had to go to the 8-foot pool to pass the swimming test. But he was kind of considerate. He left me over at the 4-foot pool with 2 of his students, and I practiced. You had to swim at least 75 feet in the pool. So he let me use the noodle, and I got on my back. I made it to the 75-foot mark, and I stood up. Now he said, "Get on the noodle and come back," and I couldn't do it. But thank God he gave me an A. I passed with flying colors, and to this day, I still cannot swim, but I do go every now and then and get on the noodle. So that to me was a challenging situation, but I've said before, it does not compare to some things that some of my brothers and sisters experience in this life. And I thank God for that.
I think the most challenging part of my life, and people may be surprised, it is overcoming my low self-esteem. I had the worst self-esteem that you can imagine. I've always been like larger and shorter than most of my friends growing up. I grew up in childhood, I was always that kid, but I had a lot of energy, a lot of personality. So that, kind of overshadowed a lot of things. And it was really my front. That's how I kind of protected myself. But I was always susceptible to teasing. If somebody ever got mad with me and they wanted to get back, they would tease me, and they would tease me about the way I looked, my size, my height, whatever they could find. And that was always very challenging for me, is to find my self-worth and to find out, like who I was and why, I allowed people to have that kind of control and power over how I felt about me. That was a life lesson that I learned way later in life, but growing up, it was devastating for me. It was very hard to maintain like this facade that I put on, because I hated myself. I hated the way I looked. I hated the way I felt. I always wondered, like, how come I'm, that much slower than everyone? How come I'm this short, much shorter? Why am I this much bigger than everyone? It's very active. I played sports all throughout, high school. And I always seem to be one step behind as far as the popularity scale of things. And so, I would smile and I'd get along, because I'd get in where I fit in, when wherever I could. But behind the scenes, once that door closed, when I was in the room by myself, I would cry myself to sleep, because I just hated the way that, God made me, the way I looked, the way I was when it came to, being popular with the boys, or being, very the smartest, or like I didn't have a niche over anyone. And that just helped to just drive my self-esteem lower and lower and lower. And so later in life, I just really, I think, God just put me in a place where people helped to build up my self-esteem. And it wasn't until I was almost 40 years old that I became comfortable in the skin that I was in. People would always, oh, you look so nice. Oh, or you dress so nice, or you this, you that. But I didn't feel it. I didn't believe it. I thought that it was always like another tease. Like they're just saying that to, but they're secretly laughing about it in the background. And I just beat myself up all the time. But I overcame it by just telling myself, like I would talk to myself openly, like verbally speak to myself like I would any other friend, and started building up my own self-esteem. And I would tell myself, you are worthy, you are beautiful, you are, you are attractive. And I would say this to myself because I didn't believe anybody else when they said it. And once I started to really internalize like who I was and took ownership of what, my life had become, what I look like, if I don't like my weight, then guess what? Do something about it. And I started taking ownership of the way I dressed, the way I looked, things of that nature, and built myself up the way I would any of my friends. I was always that person that was cheerleading for everyone else, but I wasn't doing it for me. And that became almost, detrimental, like physically and emotionally. It just really started tearing down the very person that I was. I heard a lady say that I am, was what God was the strongest words that Jesus spoke in the Bible. And she said, you have to be careful what you use after that, what you say about yourself after it. So now it was like, I am, this, I am beautiful, like words of affirmation just to build up. Because when I heard that, it just kind of knocked me back, because I'm like, you're right. Because when he said, I am, like the world, the earth shook, those are powerful words. And you have to be careful about what you say about yourself after you speak those words. And now I'm intentional about what I say after I speak those words.
My challenge was in my career and dealing with politics in my career. I came into my administrative position on the Democratic Party. And before I retired, I was subjected to the Republican Party. And regardless to who I served, I did my best. I never picked sides. I treated one side, one party, just as, fairly as I treated the other. Well, one day, my assistant commissioner was interested in knowing my thoughts, my political thoughts. And as far as a state employee, you really shouldn't been in that direction. But because I did not share my political thoughts with the assistant commissioner, I was labeled as a saboteur. So for the next 2 or 3 years, employees of mine were assigned to spy on me, to watch me, to record me. And that lasted for 2 years. And I would go outside at break time, take a walk during the day. I would go in my closet and I would actually pray, Lord, get me through this. So my survival was the grace of God, because several times I was pushed to the edge of that cliff. Several times I had to step back and say, God, give me grace to make it through this meeting. Give me grace to make it through this day. Give me grace to make it through this conversation. Hold my tongue. That was the most challenging point in my career, is trying to serve one party as I did the other and keep myself clear of any type of accusations or denigration of character. But God got me through it all. God's grace got me through it all.
And this is back in high school when we were younger. And of course, in the 60s, we were the church that couldn't do anything. We couldn't put into tobacco. That's when kids did their work during the summer to get clothes and do the school money. We couldn't do that. So my mom and dad made us pick cotton. There were 12 children. And we had to help our mom and dad. So they made us stay out and pick cotton. Cotton season stopped. It wasn't against our religion to pick cotton. Of course, we couldn't touch a cigarette and we couldn't put in tobacco. So that was out of the question. The other kids were able to put in tobacco and get their school clothes, but we could not. And my parents took us out of school in August. Late August is when cotton season started. It would be August. It would be September, October, and November. So the first 3 months of school, Bishop Johnson's were out picking cotton to buy school clothes, so we said. And the teachers realized that was not the case, but mother and daddy took the money to help the family, because my daddy was a logger and he could only work when the weather permitted. And in the wintertime, it was very hard for him. And half the time he wasn't working. So we picked cotton and mother and daddy would take the money to help the family. Well, November came, Thanksgiving, and of course it was time to go back to school. We had been out of school for 3 months. And I went into typing and I went into my math class. And the first thing my teacher told me, Ms. Rose, she said, Thorne, they called us by our last names at that time. She said, Thorne, you don't need to take typing because you've been out, you've missed 3 months. You will never catch up. We're already 3 months ahead of you and you just gonna flunk the class. And when I went into my math class, that teacher told me the same thing. I wanted to take applied math. I wanted to take another math course. She said, you've been out of school too long. You've lost too much time. You'll never make it. Well, I wanted to prove them wrong. So I took it anyway. I said, I'm going to just do the best I can. And to this day, I can type. I learned the keyboard. I was a little bit behind. There are things that I don't know, but I can sit down and type just as good as anybody who was in there for the full school year. math, had I not gone through and taken the applied math course and the other math course that I wanted to take and just taken what the teacher said and not done that, my goal was to prove them that I could do it. I could pass, and I worked hard and I studied. I worked and stayed up at night trying very hard. My sister was very studious, the one that was older than I, Betty, very studious. So she had no problems. Everything kind of came easy with her. But mine, it was rather hard. I was not a fast learner. I kind of dyslexic, I would say, but I was able to make it. And I can type to this day, and I still do. As a matter of fact, I had a job early on as secretary. So I am able to type, and I do know math. Math is one of my better subjects. I love math. So I thank the Lord for that. I was intended to prove them wrong, and I did.
I know that my choices were arranged for me already. I know that. I know I know that what I do, God has me, and He makes my path. I just try and take the steps down the path He lays. So I have no regrets because I know everything goes through Him. Nothing that has happened to me has happened outside of His knowledge, outside of His doing. So I'm content. I'm blessed.
I don't feel that I made the choices. I think I was kind of directed to a path. And I say that because when I worked, my job was in financial accounting. And in order to have, we had to have educational credits in order to have that on our annual evaluation. So my interest was nonprofit work, it was nonprofit. And I got my certificate in nonprofit management. At that time I was just thinking, it was my interest. I got my certificate in nonprofit management. But now the work I do in the church and with my nonprofit work, all that experience came together, and plus working in local government, it just gave me tools in my toolbox that I can use in the church and my nonprofit in the community. So, but I don't feel that I made those choices. I think I was guided along the path to do those things that helps me so much in the work that I do today.
If I had it to go over knowing like I know now, I would have made an attempt. I would have made sure, I'll put it this way, that I was more in my children's life than what I was. I did a lot of work around the church. I was always in the kitchen cooking every Sunday, helping my Mercy clean the house, doing all these things that put my children in the hands of other people, and they were not right with me. So if I had it to go over, I would have taken a more direct role in their lives instead of just, as they used to say, when the church doors swing open, I swing in. So I would have done that. I did not allow them to go to the youth conference. I regret that so much because I realize now that they missed so much. Their cousins and the other children at church were going to the youth conference, but I was afraid they were going to get in trouble and they would not be around the church, around my Mercy, El Mercy, other saints, and something might happen, and just all grades of ignorance. But thank the Lord, things turned out as well as they have. I have learned to accept where I am and make the best of life as I move on, and try to help make it easier for my grandchildren and my children to avoid the mistakes that I made.
Yeah, I'd have to say yes. I'm content with my life's choices, good or bad. They were my choices and I made them and made the best of them. So they may not have always been the best choices and taken me where I was, where I wanted to go, but those choices guided me and took me to where I was supposed to go. So I'm where I'm supposed to be because this was God's will that I got here. Maybe I took a detour here and there, but I'm still exactly where, He wanted me to be. So I would say, yes, those choices were, I'm good with them. because I learned from him if I did nothing else, you know?
feel like everything happens for a reason. And I've met a lot of great people. I've had a lot of great experiences. And I have a lot of great memories. So I think overall, I'm content with my life experiences, choices, because I feel like I was always where I was supposed to be at the right time. And God is in control. So if there's anything that I wasn't meant to do or anything, places I wasn't meant to be, and then not only that, things could have always been worse. So I'm just very thankful and grateful for the life that I've had, the experiences that I've had, the people that I have in my life. And that makes me content because things could have always been worse. Well, God is faithful. And I believe that anything I ask Him for, that He'll give it to me. And He has. So I just I just know that where I am and where I've been and opportunities that I've been blessed with, people that I've been blessed to meet, has all been because of Him. And I just put all my faith in God in all things. At the beginning of my day, the middle of my day, the end of my day, all my faith is in God. Even at times where I feel like I don't know if I can push through, somehow I still push through. And I know that I owe it all to God because without Him, I'm nothing. And my faith is in God. That's all I can really say.
Lots of experiences, but this is one that I would love to share because it is so pertinent to knowing that there are angels about us. Back in the day, of course, going back again, back in the day, I was always helping Mother Mercer do whatever needed to be done, count the money, doing the sisters' report and all that stuff. When you leave the Wilson Church, if you go down to Large Street and make a left turn, you go across the railroad track about a block away, block and a half away. And so that was the way I was going for whatever I was headed to do at that time. And there was a railroad track you have to cross. And I was headed down there going on about my business, just don't know where my mind was. But all of a sudden, I was on top of the tracks and the train was blowing for everything it had in it. I think the arms were down. I'm not even sure. I don't know. I never heard any blowing until I was right up and I just closed my eyes, called on Jesus. I'm assuming I called on Jesus. And I'm sitting on top of the tracks with all this blowing in front of my eyes, and I'm just waiting for the train to hit my car and drag me on down the tracks. And I was on the side that it would have hit the passenger's side first. I was contemplating maybe I can open the car and roll out on the driver's side. And I was just, I don't know what to say when I think about it, because I was on top of the tracks and the train was going by. And I'm hearing all this noise as I'm on top of the tracks, but on the way to the tracks, I didn't hear it. And after 2 or 3 seconds, the train had not hit me. And so I opened my eyes and I don't think there was an inch between my car and the train. I'm just up on top of the tracks. And the Lord I feel sure the angels just put the shield there so that the train did not hit my car. And I was so torn. I think I backed down the tracks and just went another way. But until then, I couldn't move. I was just in a trance and I just sat there and the train went on by. It's a back tracks where they have I guess the cars that come by, cargo cars, and it was like 4 or 5 of them. And they all of a sudden they were gone. And instead of me going across the tracks when the arms came up, if there were arms there, I just backed up and went another way. It took me some time to get myself together, but I knew then that the Lord had his arms around me. I knew that the angels were about me, and I knew at that time there is a God. And to this day, there is a God, because I don't see why and how I was not killed.
Waking up one morning, trying to get out of bed and was not able to move. And all I could think about was, who's going to pay the bills if I can never get out of this bed? And I said, Lord, if you take me, I know where I'm going. And if you allow me to get out of this bed, I know where I'm going. I'm going to work. So just having that hope, that desire to say, I give it to you, Lord. Whatever you want, I'm here. Get me out of this bed. Let me get dressed and go to work, or take me. Either way, I'm good.
When my husband was in law school in Chapel Hill, I worked in adjoining town, Carborough, and we had this car. We were having car problems, and on my route to work, there was a stoplight on the incline, because Chapel Hill is hilly. So during those car problem days, I would approach that light and I said, Lord, please let that light be green, because if I have to stop, I'm going to have to put the car in neutral. I'm going to have to hold the brakes, and I have to give the car a little bit of gas so it won't cut off and I won't roll back and hit the car behind me. So some days the light was green, but other days I had to use my process to get to my job. And my husband, it was one weekend, he was scheduled to come to Greenville for his Army Reserve duty. So my mother called me that Friday. She said, Joyce, are you coming home? Because Roper was like an hour and a half from Greenville. So I said, I'm not coming home because, we're having car trouble, and I'm just going to not put that extra pressure on the car. So that Friday morning, or the morning when I was in prayer, and I heard this still small voice. It said, if you trust me to take you to work and back, why can't you trust me to take you home and back? And I remember that to this day. It made me realize that, God hears our smallest prayer. I knew I was praying, but, I'm just trying to get to work, do what I have to do. But, I just got so joy-filled. And it made me realize, God is real. He listens. And he's a very present help in the time of trouble. And, that just cemented my faith. And I thank the Lord for that.
Everything that I've ever been through in my life has been an additional confirmation of who God is, and my faith and belief in him from a very small child. I've been in church, maybe not this church, but I have been in church. I believe we came into CLGC, or I did, when I was 9 years old. And but my grandmother, my mother, they were here. My grandmother was a member of this church early on in her life. And, my mother grew up in the church for a while and then left out. But when she brought me back, I was exposed, to God, and I've always known God. But my babysitter, she was a Baptist. So I grew up going to the Baptist church, and then had a different babysitter a little later, and then went to the Pentecostal church. And as kids, we just ran around and we played, and we really didn't really get into like what the Bible was, but it was still all learning. So when things happened in life, when death came, when accidents occurred, it was always just confirmation that God's will was being done. And even though I understand it differently now, I always had that understanding. I always had that belief that this happened for a reason. And it wasn't just a cliche or things that people just said. I truly believe that everything happened for a reason. And the reason was whatever God, had in store, had planned for us. But I think for me, I was recently in, an automobile accident. And with that accident, I started like thinking back on like how that could have gone. I was rear-ended, and I was kind of pushed a little. And I just remember thinking, thank the Lord that she hit me, because when I was hit, I looked over and there was a young student walking on the side of the road. And I was like, if God didn't have me here in this place at this time, there wouldn't have been anyone here to buffer or stop that car, and it could have, possibly hit that young girl that was walking. And it was like things like that that I see, throughout my life. And I go, that was God. That was God. I get stuck at a light, the light turns so fast. I might be mad and screaming and hollering at that light. You're like, I'm running late. But, I thank the Lord, because you see things that happen that you're spared from, and it's just those things. Even when I'm literally, if I'm outside and I'm in my garden and a butterfly lands, I'm like, that's God. Look at God. Like all these things, I see God in the small things and the big things, and it's just that confirmation over and over again throughout life that I'm going, that was God. It could have been so much worse, but that was God. And it's because of that, when I'm speaking to people who are experiencing tragedies, it's easy for me now to say that was God. If I lose someone, because they've passed on, that was God. And I see and experience life in a totally different way because of my, faith and absolute belief in God.
Back to high school and college. It was so rough for us in high school. It was really, really rough because we were always behind. The teachers picked at us as well, so as the children did. And one day I was I think I might have been in the 10th grade, and I had gotten back in school from 3 months of picking cotton. I was in Mr. Lofton's room. I will never forget Mr. Lofton. I was in his room, and I went to the back of the class. I always go to the back because I was afraid of being called on. So I went to the back of the class. I knew I couldn't read well. I couldn't spell. Just so many things against me. So I went to the back of the room and sat. And when he called the roll, I knew I had been absent all this time. So when he got down to Yvonne Thorne, he said, Yvonne Thorne, and present. And he said, and then all the kids started grinning and laughing. She didn't stay that they pick on, they stay and pick on you. She back in school. Anyway, he was a good teacher. So he said, your name is Yvonne? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I tell you what you do. He said, you come right up here. You sit right in front of me. You take this chair in front of my desk. He said, Yvonne's a very special to me. He said, my wife's name is Yvonne. He said, and if your name is Yvonne, you belong right here. You are very, very, very special to me. He said, so you sit here every day. This is your seat. And he said, you're very special. Your name is Yvonne. I don't often run into people who have my wife's name. So I felt good. The kids stopped laughing. And I sat there looking, like Bishop Johnson's. That's what they called us in those days. And I noticed that when he would we would read, he would always give me an easy paragraph to read, a very short paragraph that was very easy to read. And every time when I would read it, he would make just a great comment. And oh, that's right. That's awesome. That's awesome, Yvonne. That's good. That's awesome. And I was just so happy to have him. He would give me easy questions. He would almost answer the question in his question. So it was really easy for me to answer. And he just helped me all along the whole while and helped to build my confidence up in that room, so that the kids, although they were trying to pick at me, but he was, embellishing everything to help make it better for me. And that started to build my confidence up. It started, might have been the ninth grade, but that started to build up my confidence. And I was so excited. I hated school because I didn't feel that I belonged. I was always glad to get back home and come to church because I felt so at home. But at school, I just felt so out of place. But thank the Lord, he started at that day, uh, when I got back in school, helping to build my confidence up. And I realized now he was giving me easy questions. He was giving me very easy sentences. He would ask me in a way that I would have to answer. I would have the answer correctly. And he would also, say things when I come in the morning. Good morning, Yvonne. You look mighty pretty today. And I knew I didn't look pretty, based on what they considered pretty, but he always had some things to say that built my confidence up. So I appreciated that. I started to feel better about it. And as he built my confidence up, I began to do better. So I thank the Lord for that.
On the career side of things, because there's the spiritual side of things too. But then on the career side of things, I think being the first Black female director at the Division of Motor Vehicles, that to me was a level that I was told that someone like me could never reach. And I said, with God's grace, I'm here. On the spiritual side of things, knowing and hearing our bishop teach, knowing the moment that I believed, that I had faith, that I have eternal life with God, that very moment, knowing that, realizing that, having faith and believing, that to me was the ultimate. And knowing, and you know what, just knowing that even before I was thought of, even before the foundation of the world, he chose little old me. It doesn't get any better. I don't care if I'm a millionaire, billionaire, it doesn't. There's nothing that can measure that knowledge. Knowing that he knew me before I was born, before I was conceived, before I took my first breath. He knew me. He knew I was going to be his. That gives me tears of joy. That gives me such an accomplishment that it's like me and my buddies out on the golf course and we hit a good shot and we say, thank the Lord. And people look at us like we're crazy. We're just like, yes. Or we make a good putt. And there's nothing like making 22 footer and it goes in that cup. And you say, you jump up. Thank you, Jesus. And then your people. So being proud of being a Christian and sharing my faith and realizing that wherever I am, God has me. There's no other accomplishment. I'm done. Stick a fork in me.
I think it's being able to advocate for someone going through some life challenges when I have the experience or have the tool to direct them or help them in whatever the need is. My grandchildren they call me Frederick Douglass lovingly because, they feel like I'll take on the challenge. But now my grandchildren call me Frederick Douglass. So it's just being able to advocate for someone to be able to help them in their time of need.
I've had many accomplishments and achievements, but the ones that really stand out, the ones that gave me the most joy was of course, graduating with my degree. That was like a big deal for me because I was the first person in my immediate family to ever go to college. So to graduate with not just a bachelor's, but also a master's degree really, made me feel like I was accomplished, because now my daughter is seeing, her mother graduating, and now she knows what the expectation is. And it wasn't, and it was great because the year I graduated with my master's, she graduated from high school with her high school diploma. So it was like, that was like, yes, onward and upward, we're going to be achieving big things. Like, this is just the start of, you know, what God has in store for us, and how, the planes and the heights that he is going to take us to. So those were always like my biggest achievements. It's just things with her, like seeing her, watching her grow, knowing that, I did this, I helped, her achieve this. I think that was my accomplishment too. If she did it, then that was mine as well. Like, I was definitely all in for like the first step that I watched her take. And it's like, that's my kid. Look what I helped teach her to do when she spoke her first word. Look, she sounds just like me. Like, if you know her, then you know me, because if you ever seen her attitude or heard her speak, like, I'm like, that is me. And seeing that in my child is like, oh, okay, all right, Lord, like, I'm not taking full credit, but you know what? I had a big part in that. And that is like an achievement for me, especially when I see, children of maybe friends or other like coworkers and things that aren't doing the same thing. So I look at myself and I go, okay, that was me. I'm going to take credit for that, because I, set boundaries. I maintained those barriers, and and those things, and I put them in place because of what I wanted to see achieved, in another person. But so yeah, I accept those, her achievements as mine, and the ones that I've helped accomplish. Like when I got my first job, like that was a big deal, because going through the interview process is not fun. And it got to the point where I would walk in an interview like, okay, when do I start? Just because I learned to have that much confidence in myself and have those achievements. Like when they would call me, like, of course you were our first, pick. You were the top candidate. And those were big accomplishments for me, because I just saw them as little doors being opened. And each time another door opened, it was like, okay, get all you can get from this room. Then we're going to move to the next room. Get all you can get from this room, and just keep building. And now I feel like I am in a good place in life where I can say I've accomplished everything that I wanted to at this point, except for, of course, marriage. That was one thing I wanted to be by now, but God has other plans. So outside of that, that's the only thing that I have not yet, that's the only goal or accomplishment, if you will, that I have not yet achieved in my life. And you know what? And it's all good, because when it's supposed to happen, it will happen, just like everything else that has occurred in my life.
Moving away from home for me wasn't easy because I'm so close to my family. But moving away from home also allowed me to achieve a lot. So I'm grateful for that. And I feel like if I would have stayed, within this closeness and not wanting to leave, that I wouldn't have pushed myself to find more things that make me happy, to find my calling, and to achieve the goals that I've achieved now. So just not being fearful to take risk, to take a step, to take a chance, to just follow my own path and really do what was meant for me to do overall, not just in my career, but just in life. I feel like I needed to grow in my own space. So I achieved a lot personally, just being able to be on my own and not really have anyone there to just constantly pick up the pieces for me. And the move was just kind of like spur of the moment. I didn't really have, I was in Philly, I was working, and I'm just like, I just wanted to move. Like I just didn't want to be in Philly. And I interviewed like over the phone for a job in DC. And then he called me down for a face-to-face interview and he hired me on the spot. He was like, when can you start? I'm like, 2 weeks. And it was on from there. Like I went home. I got the job, like literally moved out my apartment, packed up, and moved to DC like within a matter of a week or so. And it was just all so instant. And like once I got here, I was thinking like, what did I do? Like, why did you just up and leave? Because every chance I got, I was going back to Philly. Like I was going home every chance that I got. And I really had to just focus in on, you may not have had a plan of coming here, but I knew after a certain point in time, like it's something here for me. Like it's something here for me. I felt like I jumped the gun in the move, but was something here for me.
It was church, it was work in the fields, it was school when you could get there, and it was come back home. It was fast and pray. We were the church that couldn't do anything. We could not play ball. We could not do exercise. We could not chew gum. We could not, if we took exercise, and put shorts on, we had to put a skirt on top of the shorts.
I can see myself walking to school as a first grader just as if it was yesterday. I was wearing white socks, black patent leather shoes, a little tent gray dress, and just imagine a first grader or kindergartner in a gray dress with a big white collar and white socks and black patent leather shoes. And I had red hair, ponytail here, 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 and here. And I would get teased to and from school, during lunch. I was called Bishop Johnson, didn't know what that meant.
I brought the teacher, my gym teacher, who just could not believe what we were saying we couldn't do. We can't bounce the ball. This against our religion. Brought her out to the church so Mother Mercy could tear her to things, because she just didn't believe that we couldn't, take exercise in school.
That my brothers would walk, actually, and I love my dear brothers. We talk about this all the time. When we were walking to school in my era, they would walk either well ahead of me or behind me because I had the long dress on, and I had to have the head covered and all that. And I walked to school almost by myself because they were really embarrassed to walk with me because I looked like a little pilgrim. But if anybody bullied me, they would come to my aid. They were, protecting me. Ronnie on one side, Donnie on the other side. Don't mess with my baby sister. It was rather sad because we were dressing the way that our parents were taught to dress us. Then we grew up a little bit and we got old enough, still in that same era, but we got old enough to sort of have the audacity to want to fit in and look like the other kids. So we would change our clothes after we would leave the house, and we would change our clothes back, on the way back from school. And that went on for quite a while, but we still were teased because of the way that we looked. And then some of the kids that knew that we were changing our clothes would run up behind us. If we had our belt on that sort of made our dresses shorter, they would jerk our dresses and bring them down to the length that they were when we left home. So that was embarrassing. So growing up was rather sad, but our parents raised us based on what they thought was right.
I guess the Lord looked on us with pity and say, "You fools, you're dragging all this luggage around, and it's not about this, it is about your heart." But in our era, it was very rough. We could not do anything. We couldn't go to a ball game. We could not go to a class dance. We could not be in a class play. All we could do, again, I'll say it, and I guess this will sum it up. We went home and went to sleep. We got up and went to work or to pick cotton in the fields or whatever work was at that time. We went to church, and then we went to school. And as we kind of got the name of when the church doors swing open, Bishop Johnson members swing in. So it was church, school, work, and no play. So everything was against our religion. It was really rough, very rough, but we made it. Thank the Lord.
In my era, or the 19s, as my niece says it, I talking about feeling dated, but in my era, I was born in 71, so the late 70s, early 80s is what I consider my era, because that's when I have most of my, childhood experiences and memories.
Born in the 80s, but growing up in the 90s. I personally believe, for what I know, that the 90s was the best era. Outside always smelled like a cookout, like somebody was always barbecuing. The music, the hairstyles, the fashion, it was just, even though I was still a kid, it was just like, it was a world that I knew my parents were not going to let me like emerge into. Like, you're not wearing your hair like that. Like, you're not wearing those clothes, because we were church kids. And while my friends from school were doing stuff like, on Fridays and the weekend, of course, I was at church.
But it was, for me, it was awesome. It was awesome. We grew up in a small town in Milford, or we lived on Church Street. Everybody lived on this one street, Church Street. It was the whole neighborhood. And you knew all the kids, you knew all the adults, any adult on that neighborhood would be sitting on the porch. If they saw you cutting up, you got it from them. Like, they'd call you out on it. Then they call your parent. And when you got home, you were going to hear it again.
But it was still just being able to see it and experience it, and just still like have a feel of what the 90s were like. The music, definitely 90s music, 90s R&B. For me, it's just like the 90s had a scent, and it just smelled like cookout, because someone was always barbecuing, somebody was always cooking out. Um, my parent, like my parents were really cool at this point in time. Like, they were becoming a little bit more lenient, like letting us do, like, yeah, you can go to the movies or things of that nature. Do a little more worldly things.
I came up in the era of, the street, like, you stand outside. There was no playing inside. Even if it was raining, you found something to do. If you were at somebody else's house, you found something to do besides just sitting around in the house. If you were in the house, you were cleaning. So we didn't want to be in the house that much. And we always found some kind of activities. We were the hopscotch, the hide and seek, played outside, and you were safe. We were safe doing it. Like, it was not, we didn't need adult supervision constantly. We weren't afraid of being abducted. We weren't afraid of, being hurt or harmed. We were always in a safe place. We looked out for one another, even when we didn't like each other. We still looked out for one another. All of the adults in the neighborhood looked out for the kids. If you were getting home late from work, we would be eating at somebody else's house. Or if my mom had to work overnight or had to go away, we would be sleeping at someone else's house. It was never, oh, these are my kids and I'm only taking care of mine. Everybody's child in that neighborhood belonged to everyone else. And that's just the time that I grew up in. And I know it feels like a million years ago, but it was amazing. Like, I mourn for these kids who'll never know, running barefoot outside in some tall grass because somebody's field didn't get cut, and stepping on something and cutting your foot. Like, it was like stuff like that, where you learned how to adapt, you learn how to get along, you learn how to overcome critical thinking, all of those skills that we want to have now. We had those growing up. And you race for no reason. You were always running. I don't think I ever walked anywhere. We were always running, riding bikes. If you'd have like one person in the neighborhood with a brand new bike that they might have got for Christmas, and be 4 or 5 of us piled up on there, riding down to the corner store.
If I had to choose, I would live in the 90s. I would definitely live in the 90s.
Everything just seemed like, and maybe I'm romanticizing my memories of growing up, because everything was not always completely, great. But what I took away from it was wonderful. Whatever challenges we had then, we overcame them as groups, like together. If someone was in an abusive home, maybe they were being abused or something by a parent, guess what? You had a whole street full of parents that was coming knocking on your door, and it was just a time of protecting one another, looking out, and camaraderie, which is why now as an adult, that's who I am. Like, I love like the sisterhood. I love fellowship. I love just being like one and just looking out. Even like I said, even if you don't get along, my ultimate goal is let's do this together, and that may be the social, like Leo butterfly in me, but that's just who I am. I just want to do it as a group. I don't like doing stuff by myself because I didn't grow up doing things by myself.
Situations I could have avoided. I remember a confrontation with a student. I think I was in the 7th grade, and it was when I think schools were actually just becoming integrated. And I remember walking into a classroom one day. Now, when I walked into the classroom, I had in the back of my mind the things that I was raised on. And I reacted based on how I was raised. I walk into this classroom, probably 7th grade, as I said, and this little girl was sitting in my seat. And I always like to sit in the front row. So I walked up to her, I says, "You're sitting in my seat." And she used a racial slur. And she reached up from a seating position and smacked me. And I went back to retaliate. And when I went back to retaliate, the teacher grabbed my hand. That did me in completely, because my father taught us to retaliate. Physically retaliate. I was taken outside of the classroom, taken to the principal's office. The little girl that smacked me was still left in the classroom. I was suspended from school for initiating an altercation. Could I have handled that situation better? Yes, I could have. And walking in the classroom, I should have gone to the instructor or to the teacher and said, "This young lady is in my chair. I always sit there. Will you ask her to give me my chair back or give me my seat back?" But I didn't. I saw nothing except for getting that student out of the seat that I normally sit in. And she was only sitting there because she knew it was going to bug me that she was there. But what was so hurtful is that she was never punished. I was. So looking back, as I said, I approached a matter, I think, wrongfully. I would approach it differently today.
Even though I'm like content at this point in my life with the decisions and choices that I made, I definitely could have avoided those bought lessons. And my grandmom's words ring out to me that, the bought lessons are the ones that you pay for are the ones that stick with you the longest. Because that's the one that hurt the most. So I would have avoided allowing other people to speak negativity into my life. Like, knowing what I know now, looking back on it, I would not have allowed people to have so much power over who I believed I was, like who I was. Wouldn't have let them speak that negative energy and those negative words into me and where I believed them. I would have also maybe thought through things a little bit more and kind of not been so impulsive. I was very, just shoot from the hip, very, knee-jerk reaction. Would get angry really quick because that was all things that I picked up to avoid like being hurt to the point of no return by people. So if there was something that needed to be said, boom, I would just pop right off and I would say things, and I'd say things that were intentionally harmful. Like that was my weapon. And I used it, just wielded it everywhere that I felt like it needed. And I regret a lot of those, things that I did. And those are choices that I made that I do, regret and wish that I had avoided the challenges that my words created. Um, there are a lot of hurt feelings and people that I didn't necessarily need to tear down, because if you hurt me, that was my first reaction. It's like, this is how I need to get back, is just to just be vicious. And unfortunately, that severed a lot of really good relationships that probably would have had the potential of blossoming into something really, amazing down the line, but just kind of cut those off unnecessarily because of, not making the best choice in that moment in time. So yes, those are things I could have avoided, is just losing people out of my life or allowing the people that did stay in my life to hurt me, so.
I would I would say my divorce. And I know a lot of things have been said, about divorce. And I know that a lot of people feel different ways, that they have different feelings on it. But I was angry. I was so angry because I had just such a marriage that was full of violence. And when I say violence, it was not all physical. It was a lot of mental, X, Y, and Z. And I put up with it for 21 years because I thought, you couldn't divorce and remarry. So I just put up with it because I wanted to be saved. And then I realized my dad passed away, and I was sitting in the den at my house, and I was really hurt because they were not of our community of saints. My family still listen to Bishop Johnson's tapes to this day. That's where they are, the ones that are live, except for maybe one or two of them who claim nothing. But I was crying. I was really hurt because Dad had passed away. He was in New York. I couldn't go. William wouldn't let me go up there to see him, or I wouldn't have gone anyway because I was afraid that I'd be disfellowshipped from church. But I love my dad. I love my mom, my family, and I was just saying, now Dad is dead. I won't ever see him again. I can't go to the funeral. What in the world? And I was just crying, bawling and crying. And my husband came in from work, and he looked at me with the most angry eyes. And he said, "What in the world is wrong with you?" And I don't know if I said Daddy died, or before I could get it out of my mind, I had it up to here. I ain't taking no more. This is it. I have taken ugly stuff from you. And look, I was no saint. I did ugly stuff too. I don't put everything on him. I could have done better than what I did, but I was so angry with him until I said, I'm just not gonna put up with this anymore. My dad is dead. I don't have family here, and you come in and you won't even act nice toward me. I'm just through. So I got a legal separation. And I think about that. My girls, one of them was away in college and the other one was in high school. And I did not realize how important it is to have a man in the house. I will teach and I'll tell and I'll talk to all the young people. Before you throw it all away, count up the costs. Because when it was time to cut the grass, it was on me. I had to pay somebody to cut the grass. When my car broke down, it was on me. Got to get somebody to fix the car. When everything that happened, when the snow needed to be shoveled out of the, everything was me. I did not realize that I was throwing away all my help. It's a one-sided situation now because now I'm responsible for everything. Not to mention the girls needed their father in the home. But I was so self-centered and so self-concerned that I did not take the time to talk to him and to get into counseling, into therapy, because at that time at the church, again, I have to say at the church, men could get away with things, women couldn't, not nearly as easily as a man could. And I just felt that I was not being treated right because nobody is saying anything about all this ugly stuff he's doing. But my mercy would tell me to pray, don't worry about this, don't worry, just pray about it. The Lord will work on it. One day he'll see his faults, he'll come around. Don't worry about it. No, I took matters into my own hand. And when you take matters into your own hands, it ain't always so good. Most of the time, it's not. All the time, it's not good because you need to let the Lord work it out. Had I taken what she said and gone by what she said, I would have been much better off. But I had a lot on me as the mother and the father in the home. And had I had that to go over with, I would have taken time to have talked to him, to go and taken him to Elder Mercy and let's talk again. I had done it before, but I need to have kept doing it and try and point out things. I could have even said to him, William, you might not love me, you might not care for me. That's okay. I ain't worried about that. But you got these two daughters here. They need to know what a man should be like, and you need to uphold that standard so your daughters will get the kind of man that you desire them to have. There are just so many things as I look back in retrospect that I could have done that I did not do because of the anger. And so I would say that is devastating, and I would not wish that upon anybody. I would not want anybody to go through that. Many times you think you're going through something, but let me tell you, if you discard what you got, what's coming might be a whole lot worse. You need to weigh it out there. You know, you need to have the good on this side and the bad on that side. Weigh them bad boys out and see which one weigh the most. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of marriages would be saved. A lot of children would have both families and both parents in the home, and things would be much better. And then, you know, when you think things are so bad, when you really, if you loved, you know, think about the times when we were in love. And I mean, just to hear the voice, just to see the person, just to know they're on the way, just to sit down and eat. And then if you look at the good times, you look at the good things, you look at what you have created. And then I'll say this, and we'll put a lid on that. It's not about you and your youth, because in your youth, everybody is working, going to school, raising everybody, and raising the children, and nobody's lonesome. You don't have time to be lonesome. You don't have time to do this or do that. When marriage and relationship really, it matters all along, but when you really can get the joy from it is when it's all said and done. You've reared your children, you have your grandchildren, you have your great grandchildren, your kids are all intact, they're all doing well. And then you too can sit back and look at what you created and do everything you can to help them with their families and make sure that they don't go astray. Because if you think that being by yourself at 75 and 80 years old, when you didn't have to be it that way, it could have been different.
Put myself in some situations because I talk too much. Like I always had something to say. And I was always that kid, like before we went in anywhere or to a family function, that my mom would grip up like, watch your mouth before you go in here. Because I talk too much. And people, and when you just say anything that comes to your mind, people don't want to be around you. people don't want to be your friend, so that's what I had to learn. Like, you have to learn how to twist your tongue and not just say everything that comes to your mind, or learn how to deliver things in a better manner and in a better tone, so that way you don't offend people. Because even though I'm not purposely trying to be offensive, it's still about how you make a person feel. And that's what I had to learn. So learning tone and learning how to approach, learning how to still be stern and direct, but in a way that people don't take offense to, has been a big learning lesson for me. But if I had learned this at an earlier age, I could have avoided a whole lot of talking to, a whole lot of getting pulled to the side, because it's not that I was meant to be malicious in any way. I just said what I said, and I learned now how not to talk so much. Sometimes I just don't say anything.
Guess I would say my definition of success is taking on a project, whether it's life or whether it's a physical challenging project, whether it's going to school, finishing school, but it's giving it your all, just don't leave anything untouched. Give it everything you got. And once you have given it your all, whatever it turns out to be, if you've done all that you can do, then nobody can ask no more of you. You have been successful at what you tried to do because you gave it your all.
Completely enjoying what you do. When I wake up, I enjoy what I do. Um, I'm not saying I'm always clicking my heels together, just joyful to go to work, but I do enjoy going to work because I have fulfillment. I have creativity. I have planning. There's talent that comes into the kitchen, and just seeing things through from beginning to end is very important too. So when I think of something in my mind and put it on paper and order the product, and the product comes, and we prep the product, we cook the product and send it out, that's that's the successful event to me, to see things through from beginning to end, to be in an atmosphere where people are happy also to come to work. We don't I'm not walking on eggshells. There's not a whole lot of drama that happens and goes on. Work is work and home is home for me. So I'm not bringing work stress and work issues home. um, I'm just in the space where my days flow well, and I don't know, things just go well. So for me, this is the level of success where I wanted to reach, where my job is not stressing me out. I'm not frustrated. I can't wait to go home. Like, I need to get up out of here. It's not like that. Like, I know some days are going to be longer than others, and you may even hit some obstacles where you get frustrated. But that moment of frustration doesn't overpower my entire day to where I've had this completely bad day and I hate it here. I don't want to come back. Like, no, like, I'm really in this space where things are really good.
Sharing what I have, first of all, having enough to share and sharing what I have, having a given heart, a giving mind, um, just openness, just taking care of whomever needs to be taken care of. I don't think success is always monetary. I just don't. Because if I had it, I'd give it away, I'd share it. I mean, take for instance that $1.5 billion I didn't win this past weekend. I mean, what would I do with $1 billion? I know you're thinking, I could tell you what to do with it, but there's just, I mean, just success is not money. It has nothing to do with money in my mindset. It has to do with being able to share and give and receive, and it just that's just how I feel. It's not about my job, it's not about the money I have in the bank, it's not about the type of home I live in. All of those things are nice, I have those things, but being able to give, being able to share and have that giving heart is what I call success.
Well, I define success as just being content in that particular moment. There is like being content with whatever achievement I was trying to gain. It's a moving scale for me. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's always how I define success. Success for me could be just being able to check off a box saying that something is done. Success can mean, a checking off a box at a level of like just achieving at a higher level. And sometimes, I mean, it moves. It moves. It's defined, I think, by the individual in that moment in time. And for me, it's an ever-changing definition. I don't have like one static way of defining what success is. It could be, one thing today can be completely different tomorrow. It's just on how I feel. Do I feel that something that I'm looking at or something that I've achieved is a success? Because I can complete something, doesn't mean I completed it successfully. You know what I mean? So it really is going to be how I define it in that moment, in that, for that moment, that day, that year, whatever. It's going to be it's a moving scale. But right now, it is completing this project and doing it well.
My definition of success is family time. Having enough for myself and enough to share for others. And I remember this song that Bishop wrote, I think it was when we came into 2020. And it was, the song was Let Love Guide Your Mind. It says, let love guide your mind. Be faithful all the time. Help somebody out with less. Show the world that you've been blessed from above. And I'm not saying I have a whole lot, but such as I have, I try to share it with others.
Passionate. I am a friend. I'm a sister. I'm a homegirl. Um, I'm a confidant. I am. I'm easygoing. I'm humorous. I am. I'm easy to get along with. I'm easy to talk to, even though sometimes people may not see that, but that's how I want people to see me. Like I'm just very. I'm cool. Like I'm just very chill. Like I'm not caught up in a whole bunch of drama. I don't associate myself with things that don't mean me well or don't bring me peace. So I'm just at a very just mellow point in my life where things are just smooth.
A perfectly imperfect person. I want them to see me as a confidant, someone that will, keep and hold, their trust. I want them to see me as a fun-loving person that, is genuinely happy to be, in their presence. I want them to see me as someone that they can draw positive energy from, and, maybe possibly learn something um, if there's something to be learned. I just want them to see me as like a good sister, a good friend, a good Christian.
I do want people to see me as being honest, as being fair, and being loving. I don't care what the situation is or how bad it turns out to be. Be fair with me. Just be fair and be honest and do it in the most loving way that you can do it.
Number one is an independent thinker. Number two is a caring person. And I say this last, but it's first. God-fearing, God-loving.
I want others to see me as being genuine. With me, what you see is what I strive to be. I try to be the same person wherever I am. I'm not saying I try to be perfect because I'm human. And I don't try to be Jesus Jr., but, I want to be genuine in all that I do.
I think number one, I love to see the best in a person. Over my years, I have grown to this point. I look past your faults and try and pick out your best qualities and impose on those. Also, I would say I root for the underdog. I hate to see people just pounce down on people because they're less than or have less than or are not quite up to snuff as we think we might be. So I like to root for the underdog, and maybe I'll tie it together by saying I really love to take a situation and make of lemons and make lemonade out of lemons.
I love the Lord. I'm a Christian and I'm saved.
And I shared that question with my granddaughter, and she said that this should be asked of persons that know you. So I asked her, what did she think was my best qualities? And she said, you're very generous, you're passionate and grounded. So I asked her, what did she mean by grounded? And she said that I stay connected to the things that I have committed to do. And I would say much the same, but with different words. I try to be a giver, I am passionate, and I am committed.
My best three qualities are being a great friend. And friend, I can put everything like sister, daughter, all those things. I'm a confidant. I There are a lot, even within the workplace too, there are a lot of people that come to me that just need to talk, that just need to vent, just need to get something off their chest. And what you say to me stays with me. It's not going to be broadcasted out for everyone to know or for people to find out. And not only that, I'm a good Christian. I follow God. I believe his word. I lead with him daily. Um, I know his light shines through me. And that's important for me that I have that quality because the world is crazy and I can't allow myself to just get caught up in anything or allow um, unequally yoked spirits to shape me anyway. So
I would say empathy. I consider myself a very empathic person. You know, most of my friends and family seem to pick me as their go-to person to kind of let down their hair and just kind of go, like to purge whatever it is they're going through. I'm a good listener. I do give very good advice, practical advice, because I am a critical thinker. I think things through like in real terms, even if it is tough to hear. I believe I give really good sound advice. And I I don't like to say I'm truthful because I think that's like pretentious, but I believe that another good quality of mine is that I am genuine. If nothing else, I am who I am 365 days of the year, every single day, no matter what circle you see me in, wherever it is, I am always the same person.
I don't want to say losing the ability, but having to fight for the ability to be successful in the entrepreneurial world. I'm finding that the culture is still there that a Black woman shouldn't succeed. And I know I will succeed as long as I have God on my side. I know I will, as long as I keep the faith, keep the patience, don't relent. I know I'll get there.
And that was having to be the executrix of my sister's will. She passed in 2020, and that was and still is a difficult situation.
You know. And I would say the most difficult that I was not prepared for was my divorce. I was looking at it from the surface, and I just thought to get him out of my life and to have the peace and the quiet of the home, everything else would fall in place. But now that this has happened, I had a rude awakening. I mean, a very, very rude awakening for me. There were so many things that happened after that that I realized I needed a man, a husband in the house because I had had one there. And I knew all the things that he took off me that I didn't have to worry about. But when he was no longer there was a whole lot that I had to contend with, that I had to do. I just had to. My pride would not let me go back. He had come back and had asked a couple of times to come back home, but my pride would not let me because of all the ugly things that I had said. Then I was ashamed for somebody to know, well, now she took him back. I thought this, I thought that. So I let pride rule, and I paid for it. Believe you me, I paid for it. In the end, it worked out for me. But if I'd have had it to go over and know like I know now, it would have been different. But that was a devastating thing that happened. I came face to face with it. And what makes it so bad is to have had it and then don't have it. You know, if you've never been rich, and this is just an analogy, if you've never been rich, it doesn't matter. But if you've ever been rich and you've had everything you needed and wanted and didn't have to want for anything, and then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you are 2 steps from being homeless, you've had it, it's going to be rough. So to have had it and to have known what it was to not have to worry about everything, it was devastating when I had to.
Okay. Well, I think ultimately it was when I took ill in 2011. That was difficult, not necessarily for me, but it was difficult to me. I had a lupus attack, and I never in my life heard of lupus. No one in my family had lupus. I suddenly was very sick. I got I thought I had an ear infection. I got really hot. Got a cut on my eye. My eyes were very dry. I went to the urgent care. And I remember telling my sister, I said, I'm just not feeling well. Went to urgent care. They took my vitals and stuff, thought that their instruments were malfunctioning because my pulse ox was so low that they thought that it wasn't reading my oxygen level, the one they put on the finger. It was down, I think it was like in the 60s or something like that. And so they thought it was just, not working. They dismissed it. The doctor came in, she saw me, looked in my eyes, said I had a scratch on my cornea, and she started listening to my heart. And I said, listen, I'm going to lay down while you check me out because I'm that tired. And she listened and she said, I'm going to check your oxygen level again. Well, I wasn't concerned because I was so tired. Put that thing on my finger again. She brought in another machine, and she said, I'm sending you to the hospital by ambulance. She said, your lungs are not working. And I was taken to the hospital from the urgent care by ambulance. And all I can remember is going, this is so embarrassing. They are wheeling me out of this place. And people are looking at me like, this is just funny where your mind goes. And I just was like, why am I going to, she's just overreacting, but okay, I don't want to have to pay this copay. So they better, figure out how they're going to get this thing all worked out, get to the ER. And my sister was with me at urgent care. She followed me over, came in, and I said, she said, I called Brianna. She's on her way down. And I don't mean to make this a long story, but Brianna got down. I remember her coming to the ER, and she's sitting in there And I remember talking to her and got a phone call, and it was my sister Tegra, one of the sisters in Delaware Church. And I was talking to her, and I was saying this thing like, girl, they got me in the hospital. They better admit me because I don't want to pay this ER copay. And that is the last thing I remember. I don't remember anything else after that part. About a month and a half is when I got my first memory. It was like a month and a half later. I woke up. I'm saying a month and a half, but maybe it was more like several weeks later. I woke up and I was in the hospital. And I remember opening up my eyes because the first thing I do when I wake up is I just look around and I see that I'm in this hospital room and I go, oh, good. They admitted me. Now I don't have to pay the copay. Like, how silly is that? That I'm still concerned about a copay. Come to find out, I was not in the Dover hospital that I was taken to. I was in the University of Pennsylvania hospital, hub, and I had been helivac there by helicopter like 3 weeks later or 3 weeks earlier, because after the ER, apparently they moved me to the ICU because my lungs weren't working. They could not figure out why. My lungs weren't working. My organs were shutting down one at a time. They didn't know why my lungs were shutting down, why my organs were shutting down. And it just so happened, and I'm saying it just so happened, but I know why. My mom happened to come up to the hospital with mail that I had just gotten. And it was blood work that one of my doctors had run when they ran like a whole bunch of tests for whatever reason prior to me getting sick. And in that test, the doctors found out that I had lupus and I was having a lupus attack. I was unconscious and unaware. I was in a medically induced coma this whole time. And apparently the doctors were able to determine that it was lupus. They flooded my body with steroids, things to help to fight the inflammation. I had double lung pneumonia, and all of that was caused a lupus flare. And they had nowhere to move me. Their hospital was not equipped to handle my condition. They said that the doctor who was the lung doctor, the cardiologist and the pulmonary doctor got on the phone and called every doctor in every hospital that they knew, went to the director of the hospital, told them to call every doctor and hospital that they knew. They had the CEO and the president of the hospital calling around the country looking for a spot that could take me as a critical patient and needed to be placed on an ECMO machine. And that machine was only available at that time in 2 places, one hospital in Florida and one hospital in Philadelphia that had the capability to fly me there. So thank God that the hospital in Pennsylvania was able to fly down. They wrapped me up. One of the sisters took a video, showed it to me later, but they wrapped me up. They flew me to there and immediately performed surgery and placed me on an ECMO machine, which is like a dialysis for the lungs. And it went through my neck. I still have the scars on my neck now as a reminder of how good God truly is. And I was in that coma in that hospital, I think for 2.5 weeks. And the stories that they tell me about how the people showed up and took over that hospital waiting room floor, and the saints that just came out and just really showed love and support. It really did. It really blessed me to hear that, like me, like why would, they did this for me. Like it really was humbling, and it really did, again, solidify my faith in God and how he moved people to come during this time. It was more difficult for my daughter. She was 18 years old, had to make life decisions. They told her that I was on that machine for 2 weeks and that they had to take me off, and she had to make the decision whether they were going to keep me alive on this machine or take me off. I don't know what she told them, but they kept me on that machine. And the moment that they were getting ready to unplug it, to take me off, they said that it was like a switch was flipped. My lungs started working, my liver, my kidneys, everything started working as if nothing had ever happened. And I woke up, and the call that she got, which she thought was from the hospital, she said she got a call from my number. and it was me. And I said to her, but she didn't know it was me at the time. She said she got a call. And I said, Bree, where are you? And she said, I'm at work. And I was like, get your butt up here right now. And bring me some clothes. I didn't know that all of this had happened, that I made this call or anything. And she said she just cried because they had just told her like the day before that they were going to have to take me off of the machine because my body wasn't responding. And plus being on those machines causes other infections and things. So they were going to take me off, and more than likely without that breathing machine, I was going to die. And but God said, he said differently. And talking about overcoming a difficult situation, I overcame and I didn't even know I had it. I overcame that situation and didn't even know that I was going through it. But I still say to this day that difficult time in my life was not for me. That was not for me. It couldn't have been, because I wasn't aware of anything that was happening. That was for the people around who maybe needed to see a work of faith, needed to see a miracle happening, needed to see God work in that mysterious way, because and to talk about humbling, to know that he used me to reach somebody benefited from that time in my life. And so I just thank the Lord for it. My cousin who's Muslim, I was saying, well, the saints are praying for me. All my friends and family had put my name on the prayer list in their churches. And I said, the saints are praying for me all over the country. She said, and they were praying for you in the mosque too, because I had your name on our prayer list in the mosque as well. I said, well, anyone who knows the word of prayer, I'm so glad that they used, that God used me to maybe call someone to pray. I had one young lady came to me, she said, I don't even pray. She said, she don't believe in prayer. She said, but when I heard you were sick, she said, I prayed for you. She said, I prayed for you. And I was like, I said, that's the one. That's the one that God was trying to reach. Because if she's never prayed, and because she felt so strongly about me that she decided to turn to the Lord, I said, that's the one he was trying to reach. And I was like, thank the Lord. I'm glad that, he found a use for me. You know what I mean? Like how that really, I become speechless when I think about it. Like me, like little old me, you chose me. And then later on, with the word that Bishop is preaching, I started hearing, the way he broke down the scriptures, and I go, why not me? Why not me then? You know what? Because there are so many people that I've heard their testimony, and I've drawn strength from it. I'm like, then why not me? I wish sometime he could have chose a different way to do it, but I thank the Lord just the same. Like, Lord,
You want, but never to judge a book by looking at its cover. There are two sides to every story, and you need to get them both before you make a decision. So I would say, don't judge a book by looking at its cover. Get inside and see what's going on.
I wish I had recognized my spiritual gifts when I was younger, because I would not have searched. Well, I don't know if I was really searching, but I was wanting to know, but I did not realize my spiritual gifts, and I wish I had realized them sooner.
I wish I knew the Bible better when I was younger, because I wouldn't have been like so fearful of certain things, like just afraid to do, just afraid to do certain things. Like Revelations was like the scary book for me, like as a kid. Like, oh, stop at Revelations, like don't read that book. You know what I mean? Thinking I had to get my head chopped off or all this other just things like that. I just wish I would have understood the Bible better as a child, but I'm glad I know what I know now, because it's nothing to be fearful of. But as a kid, I was definitely fearful. Like, I remember crying to my mom, telling her, I don't want to get the mark of the beast. I don't want to get my head chopped off. And it's like, child, you don't have to do either of those things. But that's growth. that's learning, that's understanding, and I'm proud to not still have that childlike mindset thinking that I have to be fearful of these things because I don't. Um, so yeah, just having a stronger faith in God, just being able to go to Him in prayer at all times and ask Him for anything, and to just thank Him for all things. I wish I would have had that boldness at a younger age.
So, wow, I know a lot more now that I wish I knew when I was younger. Um, I, just from the making better choices, I think just knowing, really just knowing God and knowing the purpose. Cause I used to be so afraid. I used to be so afraid of like reading the Bible because it always just talked about the end. And I was so afraid of death that I didn't want to read anything that talked about dying or, eternity. And I just wish I knew then what I know now about the scriptures, because I wasted so much of my life being afraid of God, and not afraid like, oh, like the boogeyman afraid, but just afraid of, if I'm not that close to him, then maybe I won't, he won't take me away, or I won't die because, I don't have a place yet, or whatever the case, just so much misinformation, just so many things that I was unnecessarily afraid of. And fear was a big factor in my life, things that I think they propelled me one way or the other. Usually, when you hear about fear, you hear the fight or flight when you're in that mode. And I think I did a lot of running away because of fear. It just kind of paralyzed me into inaction or running away. I never really fully embraced just things in life, lessons in life that probably could have made life much easier for me. A lot of those things that I experienced, I didn't have to experience them maybe the way that I did. So if I'd known then just to not be so afraid, just to kind of walk in my power and to walk in and just knowing that whatever I was encountering, it was going to be okay on the other end. Instead of fearing the unknown, just go through it, know that God was there already and was going to see me through it and believe it. My life would have been so much easier, so much more, and I could have been more impactful in others as well, and not allow fear just to kind of consume some of the better choices that I could have made.
That I didn't have to wear cotton stockings, that I didn't have to wear an 8-inch dress, that I could wear colors other than brown, gray, and black, that I don't have to pray to a man, that I pray to God through his son, that I believe I have faith, and I know I'm saved. And I don't have to earn faith, because regardless of how long I live, I can never earn it. I can never earn getting to heaven. Never. I can't live long enough. So had I known these things when I was growing up, but God puts us through things to get us to where we are. So, but he knew the knowledge was coming, and he knew when I was going to receive it. He knew. But my goodness, I feed on the word. I look forward to all these teachings, the sermons that Bishop Omega comes through with. It's just every time that he gives us a message, I try to emphasize. I have to try it on. I'm going, Jesus, thank you, Lord. It fits me. It's about me, and it's like I'm the only one in the room. So the knowledge that I have gained since he has been our pastor, our general overseer, is just invaluable. And I live to hear it. I have this deacon friend of mine, and I have to tell you about my barber. I have to tell you about my barber before I go. Okay. So I have this deacon friend of mine, and he says, why do you want me to come to your church. He says, I preach, I know the Bible. I said, Dick, it's about the level of knowledge. It's about the thoroughness. It's about the research that you don't do, the dots that you don't connect. And I says, I'm not throwing shade in your direction. I'm just saying, I want you to hear something. And when you're ready, let me know. Now, let me tell you about my barber. Okay. So we were talking about being myself, I said out of my own mouth, because we were talking about the Lord. Thank God I'm a sinner. I'm a saved sinner. And I thought he was going to drop the clippers. I was like, whoa, what's going on? He said, what do you mean you're a saved sinner? You're saved. You can't be a sinner. Barb, don't let anybody hear you say that. And I paused for a while and I said, Barb, pick up your chin, close your mouth, and just let that marinate. Just stick a pin in it. And after he finished cutting my hair, I says, Rayshawn, I'm still a saved sinner. Do your research. He says, research? Once you become saved, you're no longer a sinner. I said, Rayshawn, have you sinned lately? Yeah, but I said, thank you. So you sin and you feel like you're saved. You know you sin and you know you're saved. And I says, stick a pin in that and just go do your research. But I'm telling you, what I hear every Sunday, and when I could just log on to my email and pull up a sermon and listen, that's invaluable. I can live off of those messages because every single message is about me.